In the afternoons of May 2nd and 4th of 1972, trisonic booms rang out over Hoa Lo, also known as the Hanoi Hilton, the largest Vietnamese prison camp of the Vietnam War. Two SR-71 Blackbirds broke in the sound barrier, carefully allowing 15 seconds to pass between each boom in order to send a secret message to the waiting prisoners of war. The sound was to serve as a signal and promise of freedom, and with the result of a daring and courageous communications network established within the prison. A Navy SEAL rescue mission was on the way. However, dissent in the prison would greatly complicate the operation, codenamed Thunderhead. Speaking in code. Hoa Lo, the largest prison in central Hanoi, was used throughout the Vietnam War to hold a large number of American prisoners. The complex was nicknamed Hanoi Hilton by imprisoned Lieutenant Commander Robert Shoemaker in 1966 when he found a Hilton-branded bucket in a shower. It had been built by France during its colonial rule. After his Skyhawk aircraft was taken down during a mission, Commander James B. Stockdale was imprisoned at Hoa Lo in September of 1965. He was the senior-most naval officer kept as a prisoner of war throughout the remainder of the conflict. Commander Stockdale soon learned the tap code that the other prisoners had developed while they were under capture. Additionally, the prisoners would leave written notes to each other on single pieces of toilet paper in spots that, hopefully, their captors wouldn't look in. Another crucial prisoner to the communications network established by the captives was Commander Jerry Denton, who was shot down from an A-6A intruder on July 18th of the same year. He was placed in harsh solitary confinement for 10 months and then forced to appear in a propagandist broadcast. During the televised broadcast, he faked being blinded by the spotlights so he could blink out T-O-R-T-U-R-E in Morse code. He faced harsh consequences for his brave act of rebellion. Furthermore, back at Hoa Lo, he created a secret code to communicate with other prisoners through the rhythm of his broom movements when he was forced to sweep the courtyard. Commander Stockdale became the leader of the Prisoner Escape Committee in Hoa Lo, as the U.S. Code of Conduct for Prisoners of War lays out in its chain of command. The letters. Throughout the Vietnam War, 771 U.S. military members were captured. Out of those, only 658 eventually found their way back to American soil. While a few were kept in Cambodia, Laos, or South Vietnam, the majority were kept in one of 15 camps around North Vietnam. Hoa Lo held many of them. 3 months after he was captured, Stockdale was permitted to send his wife a letter in December of 1965. He was able to write her once more 2 months later, and both letters arrived in Sybil Stockdale's hands in April of 1966. Reviewing the letters, Sybil Stockdale immediately noticed that there were confusing comments and references to people or things that did not quite fit in context. She contacted intelligence officials from the Navy in San Diego, who surmised that he was sending coded messages, and connected her with Commander Robert Burroughs in Washington, D.C., with whom she met in May and July. During the second meeting, they decided to coordinate efforts to communicate with her husband. She sent him a coded message for the first time in October of 1966, which contained an invisible ink message hidden in between the layers of a Polaroid. It arrived on Christmas Eve, and he soaked the photo by accident, which revealed the message. He wrote back using the invisible carbon paper and dating it January 2nd, 1976, with a list of 40 names of Americans being held captive. This secret letter was followed by another updating it and stressing that any rescue effort would need to target the North-South Railways by airstrike, the Hanoi radio station for propaganda, and included details about the interrogations being conducted by the Vietnamese. Outside of the communications network, global politics and actions on the U.S. government's part also played a role in the situation faced by the prisoners of war. In 1969, the Nixon administration revealed some of the abuses by the North Vietnamese on their American prisoners. This, combined with the passing of Ho Chi Minh, the head of the Workers' Party of Vietnam that same year, pressured the Politburo into passing a resolution calling for improved treatment of their captives. Before that, only 100 families had been able to communicate through 600 letters between the start of the war and 1969. The passing of the resolution made it possible for U.S. intelligence to double down on the secret messages through the increased flow of letters. By the first months of 1970, 100 families had been able to make contact with their loved ones through 600 letters. The Blackbirds. The SR-71 Blackbird plane was used by the U.S. Air Force between 1964 and 1998. A total of 32 planes were built, with 12 lost to accidents, and not a single one falling to enemy fire. The plane was designed with minimal radar cross-section as an early stealth plane. The plane was further camouflaged by its dark paint, which was meant to match the sky at night. The SR-71 was ideal for reconnaissance during the Vietnam War, as it was the world's fastest and highest-flying manned aircraft during its run, meaning it could quickly and covertly capture images using panoramic cameras from a high altitude. These missions were codenamed Giant Scale, and would happen at first once per week, since mission recovery could take up to a month. This was the result of the Blackbirds often returning with missing parts, delaminated panels, or damaged components. Starting in 1968, the weekly flights lasted 2 years. Once 1970 began, the reconnaissance flights were bumped up to twice per week. During the bi-weekly period, 2 planes were lost to mechanical problems. Although stealthy, the Blackbirds did not go completely undetected. The North Vietnamese shot 800 surface-to-air missiles at these planes during the length of Giant Scale. None of their shots met the targets. Operation Thunderhead. The Department of Defense came up with a plan to rescue its prisoners of war after the failed escape of 2 Americans. Captains John Dramese and Edwin Atterbury managed to sneak out of a Hoa Lo camp on May 10th of 1969, only to be recaptured 3 miles away the following day. Their actions were followed by angry retribution imparted on all prisoners to discourage escapes. The captured senior officers chose to adapt and revised adherence to the prisoner of war code of conduct to stipulate that rather than taking every chance to escape, Americans should only attempt such a move if there was outside assistance and a high chance of success. Despite the promise of treating captive Americans better, the harshness of the captors prompted the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Thomas Moorer to sign a memorandum directed to U.S. Pacific Command authorizing the rescue operation, codenamed Operation Thunderhead. The first order of business was securing a small island on the Red River to use as an observation post and meeting point for any rescued Americans. The USS Grayback submarine and HH-3A helicopters were sent to Vietnam. Initially, they hoped to find escapees along the Vietnamese coast that could be sent to the island, but they failed to locate any, and in April the USS Grayback sank after slipping its moorings. In June of 1972, Navy SEAL Team 1 and Underwater Demolition Team 11 were sent to North Vietnam for the next part of Operation Thunderhead. By the beginning of 1972, the CIA believed that rescuing those at Hoa Lo was possible thanks to covert communication into the prison through radio. The operation, masterminded by Lieutenant Commander Edwin Towers, called for sending the SEAL team to use swimmer delivery vehicles to spy on the area, with support of 4 daily HH-3A flights doing wider reconnaissance before conducting the rescue. The sonic booms. Captain John Dramese planned on escaping with a fellow prisoner of war to steal a boat and get to the Red River, where he would be rescued by Special Forces, a plan which President Nixon reportedly approved. Other prisoners would reportedly also seek to leave the Hoa Lo prison either at the same time or soon after. The plan was in motion, but a week before the intended rescue mission, all reconnaissance efforts were ruined by the weather. Captain Dramese began to fear the consequences for all prisoners should the effort fail, reminded by his previous experience attempting to escape. To make sure that the involved prisoners knew that the rescue effort was forthcoming, a new signal was devised. May 2nd and 4th of 1972 saw the 2 SR-71 Blackbirds fly over Hanoi. A third aircraft was placed on standby in case one of the other 2 failed. Each of the 2 days in the afternoon, one of the planes flew at supersonic speed, setting off a sonic boom. The other would do the same 15 seconds later, letting the prisoners of war held at Hoa Lo know that their escape and rescue plan could be carried out. Both sonic boom days went according to plan. The interrupted reconnaissance in the area was of lesser importance, since the previous months had given the intelligence community what they thought was sufficient information. It was believed that the mission had a 90% chance of success, so little could get in the way. However, many prisoners viewed the plans differently. On hold. Captain Dramese couldn't live with the possibility of things going wrong, so he went to the prison's senior ranking officer to remind him of the consequences that originated from his and Atterbury's escape attempt in 1969. Particularly, he brought up Article 4 of the Prisoner of War Code of Conduct, which states in part that, quote, "If I become a prisoner of war, I will keep faith with my fellow prisoners. I will give no information or take part in any action which might be harmful to my comrades." He believed that ensuring the safety of all prisoners came before possibly releasing some of them, including himself. Dramese's appeal was enough to move the senior ranking officer, who immediately asked the escape committee to stand down and withdrew his permission for escape attempts. The slow communication network meant that the signal was given, even though the effort had been cancelled by the prisoners. Thunderhead was terminated, and the mission was called off, following a series of mishaps to which Navy SEAL Lieutenant Melvin Dry was lost. The majority of the prisoners of war kept by Vietnam would not be repatriated until January of 1973, when 691 of them were sent back to the United States. Commander Stockdale was among them, and received the Medal of Honor from President Ford for his work organizing and leading the prisoners. Dark Docs is excited to announce a new channel, Dark Skies. Click the new logo on screen or the link in the description below to subscribe now. Join us as we bring the world of aviation out of the dark, with new videos exploring the biggest and fastest airplanes ever built, top-secret military projects, and classified missions with hidden, untold, true stories. It's been an incredible journey with you from our first channel, Dark 5, to where we are today. Thank you for your support, and please click to join us on our next adventure at Dark Skies.